Hi, I'm Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I was the ghost in my own family. From the time I could walk, my parents had one simple, unspoken rule in our house. My sister was right, and I was wrong. It wasn't written on a wall or framed in the hallway, but it was embedded in every look, every word, every choice they ever made. They mocked me when I tried, ignored me when I succeeded, and even laughed when my sister, Chloe, destroyed parts of my life for fun, as if my pain were a form of entertainment. But one quiet choice I made, a decision I kept completely to myself, changed the entire foundation of our family and everything they thought they knew about me. Before I tell you how everything flipped, please like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. My story starts in a small, suffocating town in Ohio. The kind of town where everyone knows your name, your parents' names, and what you had for dinner last night. Secrets here have a shorter shelf life than milk. Our house was a simple two-story home on a street lined with aging maple trees that dropped their helicopter seeds all over the lawn every spring. It looked normal from the outside. Inside lived my father, Mark, a man who believed hard work was the answer to everything, unless it was my hard work, which he saw as a strange and slightly pathetic hobby. My mother, Linda, was a woman who loved her family fiercely, but her love was like a spotlight that could only shine on one person at a time, and it was permanently fixed on Chloe. And then there was Chloe, my younger sister by 3 years. She was bright, bubbly, and beautiful, with a smile that could charm anyone, and a manipulative streak that could cut you to the bone. The world loved Chloe, and my parents were the co-presidents of her fan club. From the beginning, we were cast in two different roles. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the good student who never caused any trouble. I was the reliable beige wallpaper of the family. Chloe was the star, a vibrant splash of color who commanded everyone's attention just by walking into a room. I have a memory, so sharp it feels like it happened yesterday. I was in 10th grade, and I'd brought home my final report card for the year. Straight A's. I hadn't just passed. I'd excelled. I'd stayed up until 2 in the morning most nights, my desk lamp a lonely beacon in the dark house, my textbooks filled with my own highlighted notes. I walked into the living room, clutching the stiff piece of paper like it was a winning lottery ticket. My heart was thumping with a hopeful, childish pride. "Mom, Dad, look," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid to break the spell of the evening news. My dad glanced up from the television, his eyes flicking from the screen to the paper and back again. "That's nice, honey," he said, his focus already gone. The words were a verbal pat on the head, meaningless and automatic. My mom took the report card from my hand. She didn't look at the grades. Her eyes scanned the attendance record. Good, no absences. She folded it precisely in half and placed it on the cluttered kitchen counter. "We'll put it on the fridge later." They never did. A week later, that report card was buried under a pile of junk mail and grocery lists. I eventually took it up to my room and pinned it to my own corkboard, right next to a postcard and a movie ticket stub. It felt small and unimportant up there, but at least it was seen. 2 weeks after that, Chloe, who was in 8th grade, made the junior varsity cheerleading squad. She hadn't even been sure she wanted to try out. My parents threw a party. Not a small get-together, but a full-blown party with balloons tied to the mailbox. They invited the neighbors, my aunts and uncles, and all of Chloe's giggling friends. My dad bought a sheet cake from the expensive bakery, the kind with thick, sugary frosting and a little plastic cheerleader frozen mid-jump on top. All evening, my dad clapped his friends on the back and said, his voice booming with pride, "That's my girl, she's a real go-getter." My mom floated through the house, her face glowing, refilling bowls of chips and telling everyone the story of how Chloe had almost missed the final day of tryouts, but had made it just in time. The story got more dramatic with each telling. I spent the party in the kitchen, a silent, efficient ghost, washing the endless stream of sticky plates and glasses, the sound of their laughter and my sister's name echoing from the other room. That was my place, in the wings, managing the unglamorous work while Chloe stood in the spotlight. This became the unwritten script of our lives. When I turned 16, I wanted a car more than anything. Not a new car, just freedom. I got 2 jobs. From 4 to 7, I worked at a dusty, quiet bookstore, shelving books and breathing in the scent of old paper. From 7:30 to 11, I was a waitress at a greasy diner where the smell of fried onions and stale coffee clung to my clothes and hair. I'd come home exhausted, my feet aching, and stash my meager tips in a jar under my bed. My parents watched my grueling schedule with a kind of detached pity. "You should enjoy being young, Emily," my mom would say, shaking her head. "You work too hard. It's not healthy." The next day, Chloe would breeze into the living room and announce, "I need a new dress for the school dance. It's $100. My mom would open her purse without a moment's hesitation. After a year of saving, I bought a 10-year-old Honda Civic. It was dented on one side and the color of faded mustard, but it ran. I drove it home, my hands gripping the wheel, my face aching from smiling. It was the first thing of real value I had ever truly owned. I parked it in the driveway and ran inside to show my parents. My dad walked out, circled it once, and kicked one of the tires. "Well, it's a car," he said. He pointed to a small patch of rust near the wheel well. "You're going to want to get that fixed before it spreads." Chloe came out, took one look, and wrinkled her nose. "Ew, Emily, why didn't you get a cute one?" There was no party for my car. There was no cake. There was just the quiet, deflating feeling that even my hardest-won victories were, in their eyes, just another example of me falling short. When I won a partial scholarship to Ohio State, a real, tangible accomplishment that would save them thousands of dollars in tuition, their reaction was predictably lukewarm. "Well, that's practical," my dad said, as if I'd chosen a sensible pair of shoes instead of a frivolous one. He seemed almost disappointed that I hadn't needed him to foot the entire bill. A few years later, Chloe, who had decided college wasn't for her, got engaged to Daniel, a guy whose family owned the largest car dealership in the county. My parents were beyond ecstatic. It was as if Chloe had won an Olympic gold medal. They threw a lavish engagement party at a country club that cost more than my entire first year of tuition, scholarship included. All night, my mom would hold up Chloe's hand to her friends, showing off the ridiculously large diamond ring. "She's so smart," my mom would say, her voice full of awe. She knew how to pick a good one. As if Chloe's greatest achievement was being chosen by a wealthy man. Birthdays were the annual masterclass in their favoritism. My 16th birthday was a quiet, lonely affair. I had hoped for something special, a milestone, but the morning was just like any other. My parents were busy. Chloe was on the phone with her friends. Later that evening, my mom handed me a clumsily wrapped gift. It was a sweater, a perfectly nice cashmere sweater, but I recognized it instantly. It was the one my aunt had given my mom for Christmas last year. It still had the faint, familiar scent of my mother's floral perfume. "I saw this and thought of you," she said, without a hint of irony. For Chloe's 16th birthday 2 years later, they threw a massive Sweet 16 party in our backyard. They rented a tent and a dance floor. Chloe got a brand new laptop, a designer purse, and a check from my dad with so many zeros on it I felt dizzy looking at it. "She needs the laptop for school," they explained to anyone who asked, conveniently forgetting that Chloe's grades were a steady stream of C's and D's. My role at the party was to carry the big tiered cake out from the kitchen and help serve it, smiling while everyone sang to her. Family dinners were just a smaller, more intimate stage for the same show. The conversation was a constant orbit around Planet Chloe. "How was cheer practice, sweetie?" "Tell us about Daniel's new boat. Is it as big as his father's?" "What did your friends say about your new haircut? They must have loved it." If I tried to chime in with something about my university classes, or later, a project at my job, my parents would nod politely, their eyes already glazing over. My mom would offer a flat, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning back to my sister. "So, Chloe, what did you say then?" My words just dissolved into the air, unheard. I learned to stay quiet. I learned to make myself small. It hurt less than fighting for a space at the table that was never going to be mine. I was just a background character in the story of my own family, a silent witness to my sister's celebrated life. The first time I truly understood that their favoritism wasn't just a blind spot, but a conscious choice that could be used as a weapon, I was 25. I had worked tirelessly since graduating, climbing the ladder at a mid-sized marketing firm. I wasn't a waitress anymore, but I still had that same work ethic. I saved every penny I could, living in a tiny apartment with a leaky faucet and a temperamental heater. After 3 years of strict budgeting, of saying no to vacations and new clothes, of eating ramen noodles more times than I could count, I bought my first house. It wasn't much. A small 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet, older neighborhood. The paint was peeling in a few places, and the garden was a tangle of weeds, but it was mine. Every square inch of it, from the creaky floorboards to the drafty windows, was mine. It was a testament to my resilience, paid for with my own sweat and my own long, lonely hours. I was so proud my chest felt tight with it. I invited my family over for a small housewarming, a foolish, hopeful part of me still whispering, "This is it. This is the thing they can't downplay. This will finally make them proud." I was so naive. The party was small. A few of my own friends from work came, genuinely thrilled for me. They brought potted plants and bottles of wine, telling me how amazing I was for doing this on my own. For a brief, happy hour, the little house was filled with warmth and sincere congratulations. Then my family arrived. The atmosphere shifted the moment they walked through the door. Chloe and her husband, Daniel, were an hour late. Chloe swept in, her expensive handbag swinging on her arm, and her eyes did a slow, dismissive scan of my small living room. She took in my second-hand furniture, the rug I'd found on clearance, the simple curtains I had sewn myself. A small, pitying smirk played on her lips. "Oh, Em," she said, her voice a perfect blend of condescension and fake sympathy. "It's a shoebox." She walked into the kitchen and ran a finger along my laminate countertop. "And the kitchen is so quaint." Daniel chuckled beside her. "Don't worry, Em, we'll help you flip it when you're ready to move into a real house." My face burned hot with shame. My carefully constructed pride crumbled into dust. I looked to my parents, my eyes pleading with them to defend me, to say something, anything. My mom just gave a tight, uncomfortable little smile. "It's a starter home, Chloe. It's cute in its own way." Cute. The word she used for things she found small and insignificant. My dad, however, just nodded in agreement with my sister. He looked at me, not with anger, but with genuine disappointment, which was somehow worse. "You know, Emily," he said, putting his hand on Daniel's shoulder as if they were teammates, "if you'd just been a little more patient and waited to marry rich like your sister, you could have skipped this step altogether." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The house wasn't a step. It was the destination. It was everything I had worked for. And to them, it was a mistake, a symbol of my failure to land a wealthy husband. That Thanksgiving, like a fool, I tried again. I decided to host dinner at my new house. I thought that maybe if they saw me in my own space, a space I had earned and created, they would see me differently. I spent 2 days cleaning and polishing every surface. I spent a whole day cooking, following recipes from my grandmother's old cookbook. I bought new plates. I set the table with the nice silverware I'd inherited. I wanted everything to be perfect. It was a complete and utter humiliation. My aunt and uncle came, and they too orbited Chloe. The entire conversation was about Chloe's recent trip to the Bahamas, her new car, her son's admission into a prestigious preschool. My attempts to steer the conversation were met with blank stares. "How's your job going, Emily?" my aunt asked, before immediately turning to Chloe without waiting for an answer. "Chloe, that reminds me, did Daniel get that new boat?" The worst moment, the one that seared itself into my memory, came during dinner. My dad tried to lean back in his chair. It was part of a modest dining set I'd been so proud to find at a discount furniture store. The chair, not built for a man his size leaning back, wobbled slightly. Chloe let out a loud, piercing laugh that made everyone at the table turn to look. "Careful, Dad!" she shrieked, delighted. "You might break Emily's cheap furniture." And my parents laughed. They didn't just chuckle politely, they laughed. A full, deep, unrestrained laugh, joined by my aunt and uncle, as if Chloe had just delivered the most brilliant punchline in the world. I was standing in my own kitchen doorway, holding a hot, heavy dish of mashed potatoes. My arms trembled. I was the butt of the joke, in my own home, on a holiday I had hosted, and my own family was the laughing audience. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. I retreated into the kitchen, placed the dish on the counter, and gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white. I stared out the small window above the sink at my own messy, beloved backyard and took a deep, shuddering breath. My mom came in a moment later. She didn't apologize. She put a hand on my arm and said, in a low, warning tone, "Don't be so sensitive, Emily. She's just teasing. Don't ruin the holiday." I didn't ruin it. I went back to the table, my face a frozen mask, and served the rest of the meal, but something inside me had cracked. The hope I'd harbored for 25 years, the stubborn, foolish hope that one day they would finally see me, had started to die. After that, a new pattern began to emerge. I started to pull back, to create distance. But Chloe seemed determined to keep me tethered to the family, but only in the way that suited her, only when she needed something. It started with money. "Hey, Em," she called me one afternoon, her voice sweet as honey. "I'm in a real bind. Can you spot me 200? Daniel's commission is late this month. I swear I'll pay you back on Friday." Friday came and went. No money. I didn't want the confrontation, so I let it slide. A month later, she asked for 300, then 500. Her excuses were always plausible, always urgent. The kids needed new shoes for school, the car needed unexpected repairs, a medical bill came up, and she never paid me back, not a single dime. Finally, after she asked for $1,000 to pay for a vacation because she was just so stressed, I found the courage to say no. "Chloe, I can't," I said, my voice shaking a little over the phone. "I have my own mortgage, my own bills. I'm trying to save for retirement. I just can't afford it." The friendly tone in her voice vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp edge. "Wow, Emily. I can't believe how unbelievably selfish you are. I have 2 kids to feed, a family to take care of, and you're hoarding your money for when you're old. Some sister you are." She hung up on me. An hour later, my mother called, and I knew I had been summoned for my punishment. "Emily, I am so disappointed in you," she began, her voice cold and heavy with judgment. "Your sister is struggling, and you won't help her. She has a family to think about, real responsibilities. You don't have those kinds of expenses. What are you even doing with all your money that's so important?" "I'm paying my bills, Mom," I said, my voice quiet, defeated. "I'm trying to build a future for myself." "A future?" she scoffed. "Family comes first. That's your future. Do you want your niece and nephew to go without new shoes for school, Emily? Is that what you want on your conscience?" The emotional blackmail was suffocating. I ended up transferring Chloe the money, feeling sick to my stomach as I clicked the button. I wasn't helping her. I was just feeding her addiction to irresponsibility. And my parents were her willing enablers, using me as their personal ATM. The final straw, the act that was so profoundly violating it, broke something inside me for good, happened a few months later. I received a thick envelope in the mail from a loan company. I opened it, assuming it was junk mail. It wasn't. It was a collections notice for a $2,000 personal loan that was past due, a loan I had never applied for. I stared at the scanned application inside. My name, my address, my social security number, and at the bottom, my signature, in a clumsy, childish forgery that was clearly Chloe's handwriting. A cold dread washed over me, followed by a hot surge of rage. This wasn't just asking for money. This was identity theft. This was a crime. I drove to my parents' house, shaking with a mixture of anger and a strange, deep hurt. Chloe was there, of course, sitting at the kitchen table with my mom, sipping coffee as if nothing was wrong in the world. I didn't say hello. I slapped the letter down on the table between their mugs. "What is this, Chloe?" I asked, my voice dangerously low and steady. She glanced at it, and her face paled for a fraction of a second before her mask of indignation slipped into place. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you dare lie to me," I said, my voice rising. "You forged my name. You used my social security number. You took out a loan in my name and didn't pay it." She started to cry. They were her classic weaponized tears, the kind she'd used since we were kids to get out of trouble. "I was going to pay it back," she sobbed. "I was desperate. You wouldn't help me, so I had to do something. You forced my hand." I looked at my mom, my last shred of hope begging her to be horrified, to finally see her perfect daughter for the criminal she was. But my mom just looked at me with tired, accusing eyes. "Emily, lower your voice. You're making a scene. You're upsetting your sister." My dad walked in from the garage, drawn by the noise. "What's all the shouting about?" He saw the letter, listened to Chloe's tearful, twisted version of the story, and then he turned to me, his face a mask of disappointment. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, Emily," he said, his voice full of weary authority. "Stop overreacting." "Overreacting?" I said, my voice cracking. She committed a felony, Dad. He waved his hand dismissively. It's not a felony when it's family. She made a mistake. She didn't mean any harm. She was desperate. A good sister would understand that. She's your sister. She's family. Family. That word again. To them, family was a cage where I was trapped and Chloe held the key. It meant that Chloe could do no wrong and I had no right to be hurt. It meant her needs were paramount, and my feelings, my rights, my very identity were an inconvenience. It meant I could be stolen from, lied to, and legally violated, and I was the one who was expected to forgive and forget. In that moment, standing in their warm, sunlit kitchen, I felt like I was fading away. They had erased me. All my hard work, my responsibility, my good character, it meant nothing. All that mattered was protecting Chloe from the consequences of her own actions. I was just a resource for them to use, a tool to fix her problems, a silent, uncomplaining shock absorber for the chaos she created. That's when I hit rock bottom. I thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, that the emotional floor couldn't drop any lower. But it did. I was up for a major promotion at work. I was a senior marketing coordinator, and the team lead position had just opened up. It was the next logical step in my career, and I wanted it badly. I had been working toward it for over a year, taking on extra projects, staying late, mentoring junior staff members. My boss, Mr. Harrison, a fair and decent man, had all but told me the job was mine. I was so close to finally having something that was truly my own, something I had earned, something Chloe couldn't touch. One Tuesday afternoon, the receptionist called my desk, her voice hesitant. "Emily, your sister is here to see you. She seems upset." My blood ran cold. Chloe never came to my office. I went down to the lobby, my stomach twisting into a knot. There she was, looking disheveled and distraught, her mascara slightly smeared. It was a calculated performance. The moment she saw me, she ran and threw her arms around me, sobbing loudly for the benefit of everyone in the pristinely professional lobby. "Emily, why won't you answer my calls?" she cried, her voice choked with fake emotion. "I'm so worried about you. You've cut the whole family off." It was a blatant lie. I had spoken to my mother just the day before about a plumber. I pried her off me, my face burning with humiliation, and pulled her into a small, glass-walled conference room. "What are you doing here, Chloe?" I hissed. She just continued her act, accusing me of being cold and distant and mentally unwell. I finally had to have security escort her out. 2 days later, Mr. Harrison called me into his office. He wouldn't meet my eye. He shuffled some papers on his desk. "Emily," he began, his voice laced with discomfort, "we've decided to go in a different direction for the team lead position." I was stunned. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "What? Why? I thought I was the top candidate." He finally looked at me, his expression full of pity. "Your sister came by. After she left, she called me. She had a word with me. She said you were going through a very difficult time emotionally, that you were unstable." He cleared his throat. "Frankly, Emily, after the scene in the lobby, I can't risk putting someone in a leadership role who isn't reliable. Perception is reality." I couldn't breathe. She had done this. She had come to my place of work, my sanctuary, and deliberately, methodically, sabotaged my career. She hadn't just stolen my money and my identity. Now she was stealing my future. When I called my parents that night to tell them what she'd done, my voice trembling with rage and disbelief, I was hoping for a shred of sympathy, a single moment of maternal or paternal protection. Instead, my mother's voice was like ice. "Well, Emily, maybe if you weren't so dramatic and emotional all the time, she wouldn't have had to do that. We heard you had your own sister thrown out by security. You're embarrassing this family." They didn't just believe her, they blamed me for her actions. That Sunday, I went to family dinner. I don't know why. Maybe I was a glutton for punishment. Maybe, on some subconscious level, I knew I needed a final, undeniable ending. The air in the house was thick with unspoken anger. I sat at the dining table, pushing cold food around my plate, feeling the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on me. Finally, I couldn't take the suffocating silence anymore. I looked directly at Chloe, who was smugly recounting a story about one of her friends. Why did you do it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the room. Why would you lie to my boss and ruin my career? Chloe put her fork down with a delicate clink and gave me a cold, sweet smile. You deserved it, she said calmly, as if discussing the weather. You've been so selfish, thinking only about yourself and your stupid little career, while the rest of us have real problems. Something inside me, something that had been cracking for years, finally snapped. Selfish? My voice was shaking. I've given you thousands of dollars. You forged my name on a legal document. You are a black hole of need, Chloe. You're not just selfish. You're a user and a thief. Her face turned an ugly shade of red. You take that back, she screamed, her voice shrill. She stood up, and before I could even flinch or process what was happening, she leaned across the table and slapped me, hard, across my face. The sound of her palm connecting with my skin echoed in the suddenly silent dining room. The sting on my cheek was sharp and hot, but it was the silence that followed that truly wounded me, the absolute lack of reaction. I looked at my parents, my eyes wide with shock, begging for one of them, just one, to finally stand up for me. My mother stared down at her perfectly set plate, her hands clenched in her lap, refusing to meet my eyes. My father just sighed, a deep, weary sound of utter annoyance. He looked at me, not at Chloe, the aggressor, but at me, the victim. He looked at me with the red handprint blooming on my cheek, and he muttered the 6 words that finally, irrevocably broke me. Stop being dramatic, Emily. I was the one who had been publicly assaulted, and he was telling me to stop being dramatic. In that instant, Chloe's triumphant, barely there smirk confirmed it. She had won. She could do anything to me, and they would protect her. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The time for that was over. A strange, cold calm washed over me. I slowly stood up from the table, picked up my purse from the floor, and walked out of the house. I didn't look back. I got into my old Honda, the car I had worked so hard for, and drove away, the silence from that dining room following me down the dark street. The tears didn't come until I was miles away, on the empty highway. They weren't just tears. They were deep, heaving sobs that felt like they were being torn from my soul. It was the sound of a daughter mourning the loss of a family she never really had. I finally understood, in a way that was bone-deep and undeniable. I was nothing to them. I was a ghost in my own family album. They would never see me. They would never choose me. They would never love me for who I was. They would always, always take my sister's side. And as I drove, with the tears streaming down my face, a new feeling started to form underneath the crushing weight of pain. It was cold and hard and quiet. It was the birth of resolve. If they see me as nothing, I thought to myself, the words forming a silent vow, then I'll show them who I really am, without a single word. My war for their love and approval was over. I had lost. And in losing, I was finally free. From that day forward, I would be silent. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet grief. I didn't answer their calls. I blocked Chloe's number. I politely declined invitations to family events. I mourned the family I wished I had, the parents who would protect me, the sister who would love me. I let myself feel the full weight of that loss, and then I let it go. I poured everything I had, all my pain, all my bottled-up anger, all my ignored ambition, into building a new life. I quit my marketing job the following week. The place felt tainted by Chloe's poison. I took the small amount of savings I had left and enrolled in the real estate classes I had been idly thinking about for years. I studied for my license until my eyes burned, fueled by coffee and a burning need to succeed on my own terms. I passed the exam on my first try. My first job was at a small independent brokerage. The hours were brutal. I was at the bottom of the ladder, making cold calls and hosting open houses for other agents' listings. I felt like an imposter, but I pushed through. I learned everything I could about the market, about mortgages, about investments, about contracts. My quiet mantra became my new religion. Don't fight back. Build back. While my family assumed I was just scraping by at some dead-end sales job, I was slowly, quietly, building an empire in the shadows of my old life. After a year of relentless work, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small, run-down house in a decent neighborhood. It was hideous, with a leaky roof and shag carpeting that smelled like wet dog. I spent every spare moment fixing it up myself. I learned how to tile a bathroom from watching YouTube videos. I learned how to install kitchen cabinets, my knuckles raw and bleeding. I painted walls until 3 in the morning. 6 months later, I sold it and made a profit of $40,000. I didn't buy a new car, I didn't go on vacation. I took that money and did it again, this time on a slightly bigger house. And then again, and again. I kept my life small, my expenses microscopic. I lived in a simple, clean apartment. I drove my old beat-up Honda. To the outside world, and especially to my family, I was still just Emily, the quiet daughter who never quite measured up. I told no one what I was doing. My success was a secret, silent garden that I tended to alone. It was mine, and mine alone. Meanwhile, I heard through the town grapevine that my parents' world was starting to crumble. My father's small construction business, which had always been his pride and joy, took a massive hit during an economic downturn. He'd made some bad investments, leveraging their house against them, and they were struggling to keep up with the mortgage on the very home I grew up in. They never asked me for help, of course. That would have been an admission of failure. They complained to Chloe, who would then call me and hint that I should offer financial support. I always politely declined. "I'm sorry, I just don't have anything extra right now," I'd say, my voice calm and neutral. One night, I was doing what had become a habit, looking through public property records online. I was researching a potential investment property when a thought struck me. I typed in my parents' address. And there it was, their mortgage, the bank that held it, the original loan amount, the outstanding balance. An idea started to form in my mind. It was audacious and cold and calculated, but it felt like a strange, perfect form of justice. I created a holding company, a simple LLC with a generic, forgettable name, Midwest Property Solutions. Through a series of quiet, perfectly legal transactions, using a lawyer as a middleman so my name was nowhere on the paperwork, my company bought their mortgage from the bank. For the bank, it was just another piece of paper in a large portfolio of distressed debt they were selling off. They didn't care who bought it. So, from that day on, every month when my parents sat down at their kitchen table and wrote out their mortgage check, they weren't sending it to a faceless financial institution. They were sending it to me. I never changed the terms. I never raised the rate. I never sent a single notice. I just became the silent, invisible owner of their roof. I let them pay me, month after month, year after year, all while they thought I was the daughter who was barely scraping by. My business grew exponentially. I was no longer just flipping houses. I was buying rental properties, small apartment buildings, and eventually, commercial real estate. I bought a beautiful, undeveloped piece of land near Chloe's lavish suburban home, with plans to build a small, upscale housing development. I was a silent, powerful force in the very town where I had always been invisible. The day of the reveal wasn't planned. It wasn't some grand, dramatic scheme. It just happened. Chloe called a family meeting. That's what she called it, as if she were the CEO of our dysfunctional corporation. It was, as always, an excuse for her to show off. This time, it was a new luxury SUV, a massive, gleaming black vehicle that cost more than my first house. I almost didn't go. But something told me I should. I put on a simple dress, gathered a few documents, and put them in a plain manila folder. I was calm. For the first time in my life, I felt completely in control. We were all gathered in my parents' living room, the same room where my achievements had been dismissed for decades. Chloe was going on and on about the heated leather seats, the panoramic sunroof, and the high-end sound system. My parents looked on, their faces beaming with a sycophantic pride that made my stomach turn. After Chloe's monologue about her car was finally over, the mood in the room shifted. My dad let out a heavy, theatrical sigh. "It's just been so hard keeping up with things lately," my mom said, looking at the floor. "This mortgage is it's killing us. The payments never seem to end." Chloe put on her most convincing, concerned face. "I wish we could help more, Mom, but with the kids and the new car payment..." She trailed off, then turned her eyes to me. The entire family turned to me. The implication was as thick as the tension in the room. It was my turn to offer something. I was the single one, the one without kids. I was supposed to be the family safety net. The old Emily would have shrunk under their collective gaze. The old Emily would have felt a surge of guilt and responsibility, but I wasn't the old Emily anymore. I took a calm, slow breath. I looked at my mother, then at my father. "You don't owe the bank," I said, my voice perfectly steady and clear in the quiet room. "You've been paying me for the last 2 years." The silence that followed was different from any silence I had ever experienced in that house. It wasn't awkward or tense, it was absolute, deafening shock. Chloe was the first to break it. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "What are you talking about, Emily? Have you lost your mind? Are you making things up for attention again?" My dad just stared at me, his mouth slightly open, his face a canvas of confusion. "What did you say?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached into my purse, pulled out the manila folder, and laid the contents on the coffee table in front of them. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I let the papers speak for me. The deed of transfer for the mortgage, clearly showing the sale from the bank to Midwest Property Solutions, LLC. The articles of incorporation for that LLC, listing me, Emily Carter, as the sole owner. The internal statements from my company showing every single payment they had made, month after month, for the past 24 months. The truth, in cold, undeniable black and white. "My company bought your mortgage 2 years ago," I explained quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. "Every payment you've made has gone to me." They stared at the papers, then back at my face. It was like they were seeing me for the very first time, not as the quiet daughter, not as the disappointing screw-up, but as a person with a mind and a will and a power they had never imagined. The daughter they had dismissed, the one they had laughed at and called nothing, had built a silent empire right under their noses. Chloe's face went from disbelief to a dark, ugly shade of red. Her rage was palpable. For the first time in her life, in that room, she was not the center of attention. The power had shifted so completely and so silently, and it was no longer hers. In that moment, I could have said 1,000 things. I could have brought up the forged loan, the stolen promotion, the slap. I could have reminded them of every insult, every dismissal, every single time they had chosen her over me. I could have demanded an apology, screamed for justice. But looking at their stunned, broken faces, I realized a profound truth. I didn't need any of that anymore. Their apology would be as worthless as their praise had been. I didn't gloat. I just looked at them, my family, and said the only thing that felt true. "I don't want your apologies or your excuses. I just want peace." And that was it. All the years I had fought for their approval, all I had ever really wanted was peace from the constant pain of their judgment. The fight was over because I had finally stopped fighting. From that day on, everything was different. I forgave them, not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiveness was me letting go of the poison. But my forgiveness came with unbreakable boundaries. There would be no more last-minute loans for Chloe. There would be no more emotional manipulation. I continued to own their mortgage, and when my father's health later declined, I quietly ensured all his medical bills were paid. But I did it from a distance, on my own terms. My help was a quiet fact, a final, silent act of a daughter, not a tool for them to use against me. Chloe remained bitter. She couldn't stand that I had become successful without her permission, without her even knowing. She tried to start arguments to pull me back into the old, familiar drama, but I refused to engage. It was like she was shouting into a void. Her power over me was gone because I no longer cared about her opinion. My true power wasn't in my money or my properties, it was in my silence. It was in the strength I had been forced to build when I had no one else to rely on but myself. I had finally learned that my value didn't come from their validation or from anyone else's. It came from the quiet, steady knowledge of who I was and what I had built, brick by painful brick. If you've ever been the forgotten one in your family, you know how deep that particular pain cuts. You know what it feels like to be invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to see you best. Tell me, have you ever been forced to rise in silence when no one believed in you? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. I want you to know that I see you. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and share this video. Your story matters.